Okay, so I was trolling through some forums on Sherdog today. Came across a thread that was a little unsettling. I wish I'd saved the URL. The title was something like, fighters who cannot sign with the UFC are cowards. There was something like that, so you can try. It was something like that. You can try searching if you want to look up the thread. I'm not sure if I really want people to look up the thread because it gives attention to what is not a good thread. Not, horrible, really. Basically, in the thread it says that the UFC is the only place worth fighting in, and if a fighter doesn't sign with the UFC, he is dodging the best competition, and that's basically the only reason he wouldn't sign with them is that he's scared. I'm not going to say that this isn't true in some cases, because it very well could be, but I think this kind of just points a problem with some of the fans. Some people in the Sherdog thread disagreed with this, of course, which was good, and that is that UFC is not the only place to fight. This isn't even really UFC bashing. This is bashing of fans who refuse to look beyond the UFC for good fighters and good competition and good, other places to make your living. The UFC runs it like a business, and they keep enough high-ranked fighters to keep the fans happy, and they do keep the majority of the high-ranked fighters, with the exception of lightweights. And you look at how it works, but there are other places to fight. There are K1, there is M1, there is even Elite XC and Strikeforce have some good matchups for people. Sorry. So I just thought I'd make this video a little bit out of boredom, a little bit out of this kind of thing does kind of piss me off, is that just because you don't sign with the UFC does not mean you don't want to fight the best competition possible. I'll use a couple of examples, and I know I bring up Hellboy a fair bit, but I'm going to bring up him and Mitsuhiro Ishida, who wanted to fight in the UFC, but didn't like the idea of having Dana White control them, because Dana White wanted them to take half the money that they were supposed to make. It was in the contract that would have expired at the end of this year. That, I don't know what the number was for Ishida, but Hansen was to make 34 grand a fight, and I would assume Ishida was maybe a little more than that, but I can't imagine that much more. And of course they wanted them to take half the money, which is still a decent payday, but at the same time, if you signed a piece of paper that said, let's think more realistically instead of a fight. Let's say someone promises you, and we have it in signed writing, $500 to do a fence. Let's say that's good money for a fence, and it's not. You can get that, and then all of a sudden, right before you start, they say you're going to do it for this guy now for $250. You might balk at that. I mean, of course, $17,000 is a great deal of money, but still, when you're promised something and you don't get it, that's the thing. And people will bring up, of course, Fedor dodging competition. For one thing, I don't think Fedor is really dodging the best competition when you think about it, because I'm trying to honestly think who in the UFC's heavyweight division I desperately want to see Fedor fight. I wouldn't mind seeing him fight Nogueira again, but he's fought him 3 times. I wouldn't mind seeing him fight Tim Sylvia. I wouldn't mind seeing him fight Andrei Arlovsky, but the problem is they're currently locking Arlovsky out, so chances are Fedor may never have fought Andrei in the UFC. Now, of course, there is one fight that I'm very disappointed that will take some time and happening. That's the fight with Randy Couture. But of course, when you look at it, Randy's leaving now. Now, he would have stayed had they signed Fedor, but fine. We have one fight that we really want to see that would have definitely happened. Maybe 2 if you throw Tim Sylvia in there. Do we really want to see Fedor versus Czech Congo? Do we really want to see Fedor versus Eddie Sanchez. Oh, okay. I'll say there's another fight that I wouldn't mind seeing him fight Brandon Vera, and maybe Lesnar if he gets good. But Lesnar getting good is a long way down the road. And so let's say Randy, Tim, let's even say Arlovsky and Brandon Vera. That's 4 fights that I really wanted to see out of the UFC roster at the time. Outside of the UFC, you have Josh Barnett, which doesn't look like it's going to happen, unfortunately, but at the time it was a possibility. Sergey Kharitonov, Alistair Overeem, that's kind of about it. But I mean, it's 4-3, and the UFC doesn't seem to be interested in signing Kharitonov. I don't think they really, and they haven't really shown a lot of interest in signing Barnett. Possibly Alistair Overeem might, but when I look at it, I like those 3 fights, and they could happen outside the UFC, and people don't seem to acknowledge this. And the same goes for a lot, particularly for a lot of lightweights. Like outside the UFC, we can still have Gomi versus Jay-Z, Gomi versus Kawajiri, Gomi versus Ashita, Gomi versus Shinya Aoki, Gomi versus Shalin Hibero, Gomi versus Amadita, Gomi versus Azaredo again, Gomi versus Buscape Firmino, even Sakurai, although that would have to be a catchweight fight. Gomi versus Joachim Hellboy Hansen. I mean, how many fights do I really want to see Gomi in the UFC, for example? BJ Penn again, Shirk, Stevenson, kind of about it. Same goes for a lot of the other others: Joachim Hansen, Mitsuhiro Ishida, Tatsuya Kawajiri, Vitor Shalin Hibaro, Jay-Z is Jay-Z Calvacanti. I think I say his first name right, not sure, but the point is made. And basically my point in the end is there are promotions out there that are solid competition that are not the UFC, that are an alternative. The money may not be quite as good, but I don't think you should be fighting simply for a paycheck. The exposure isn't as good, which is not good, which is maybe something that does factor into it. But of course, the UFC is a lot controlling, and the UFC has a lot of bullshit. I think any promotion does. I think K1 has its bullshit. I think M1, we haven't seen its bullshit yet, but I'm pretty sure we'll see some. Elite XC and Strikeforce have their bullshit. I mean. But in the end, I think one of the worst environment working promotions of the main one might actually be the UFC, because the UFC seems to somewhat disrespect fighters, especially fighters that came from Pride. Even though they own Pride now, I mean, Pride is not a threat. They can finally acknowledge Pride without really any penalty, but yet we see trash talk about Fedor, about Josh Barnett, about Dennis Kang, about, I mean, calling Dennis Kang not worthy of the UFC. That was even before he got knocked out by Akiyama. It's considerably mind-boggling. I mean, you gotta look past the UFC propaganda machine. You can't believe everything the UFC tells you. MMA is a worldwide sport. It's not just the UFC. So I'm kind of rambling, so I'm going to cut this off, but just things like this really bug me, and I'm sure it bugs a lot of the other guys who've been following the sport for a long time. So I'll see you later. I don't really know when.